Good morning to everyone from scenic Jersey City.
Sounds great. And Sean, is your mic on?
Is it on? Okay, great.
So I'm ready when you guys are.
Okay, great. Coach, my name's Sean Darcy. We're here on behalf of the Frank McGuire Foundation, whose sole purpose is to honor, recognize, teach, and help high school coaches of the New York metropolitan area. It is such a great privilege to be here with you today, and I say this with all sincerity because I know what you do for kids and the difference you've made, but it's such an honor to have the premier high school basketball coach in the country, in my opinion, in the opinion of many people here today, to talk about important issues, coach, society, and so on. But we're also honored to have an incredible friend of yours that you've worked side by side with, making a difference in kids' lives. Gary Greenberg at the Boys and Girls Club in New York, who's been working with you really for 34 years. Just an incredible story. But to start off with, Coach, can you tell me in terms of how you feel about the Frank McGuire Foundation and what it means to you?
Well, I'm honored that you're even interviewing me in relation to the Frank McGuire Association because Coach McGuire is he's a legend in the metropolitan area. And for those of us who've been involved in basketball for a length of time, at the college game, he almost changed the college game. And his ability to take players from the metropolitan area here and offer them opportunities at the college level turned the University of North Carolina into the power that it is, and the class and dignity that he carried himself with. He was such a polished man. He looked like he didn't even perspire when he was coaching, and yet he understood the value of what the high school coach meant, the Jack Currans of the world, the Vinny Ascolises of the world. So I'm honored just to be included in this group, and I'm very happy that the foundation has been able to continue to support the work that's done in high school. Because we think that the high school coach has a big is a big factor in a kid's development and getting them on the right road for latter years.
Coach, when you were our honoree at our dinner a couple of years ago at the New York Athletic Club, fortunately the McGuire Foundation was able to make a financial grant to you guys here at St. Anthony's. What did you guys do with that grant?
Well, this is a place that operates, it went right into, I guess in some schools the money might go into the athletic department. But in this particular school, we operated, our deficit is about $1.1 million. So I know if I spoke to Sister Felicia or Sister Allen, they would have immediately put that money into the general fund to help to defray some of the costs related to athletics and then on into other things we have here. So money well spent.
Well, Coach, we are so honored. I'm going to pass the mic here to our good friend Gary, because there's nobody that knows stories about the kids you've coached better than Gary and the difference you've made. Got that right? And it's funny because Gary was talking about him getting out of college as a 21-year-old and somehow getting connected with you.
Right from
Gary,
the boys.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Going to games.
First of all, this is a wonderful opportunity to, it's a little unusual for me to be in an interviewing position, Bob, because we been friends for a very long time and we just casually talk on the phone just about every day. But let's go back to, let's go back to, I think when we first met, and it was around the Mandy Johnson era.
Yes, it was, yep.
So I wanted to ask you a question. Tell me a little bit about that team. That team had a lot of character, right?
Yes, yeah. The team Gary's talking about is 1980, and Gary and his friend Alan Bliss were coming to the games regularly, and we had a team which was finished, #1 in New Jersey, and they were all kids from. We had Felix Rivera, who lived right down the block, about 4 blocks down off Grove Street here. And we had Phil Robinson, who was the point guard, who lived out on Randolph Avenue in Greenville. And his backcourt partner was Mandy Johnson, who lived in the Marion projects right off Route 9. And up front, we had a big, strong Polish kid, Joe Miekowicz.
Oh, yeah.
And then we had Jared. I know this is going to be, I'm sorry.
You can take it.
No, I'm trying to turn it off.
Yeah, maybe everybody want to take a moment.
One thing we've noticed about high school coaches is how technology-oriented they are, Coach, and how good they are with computers and emails.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I don't even know if I'm turning this off.
Yeah, when it comes to,
So don't worry, we can just, cut it out, the little gap, so
Okay.
no worries, we can just pick up from where you left off.
Yeah. Joe Miekowitz was a big, strong forward of ours, and he and Jarrett King was a really good shooting guard forward from out on Old Bergen Road. So the kids were from all different neighborhoods in town. They had grown up in the rec gyms, and they were just a terrifically motivated, very close group of kids from an era when the kids still went to the gyms to play, they went to the parks to play, and they had never traveled outside of their neighborhood. The only time that I think any of those kids had ever traveled was if they had a chance to go to basketball camp. And then that particular team, for the first time ever, we took them to Las Vegas to play in a Christmas tournament. And we fundraised for about 6 months, and my wife probably did the lion's share of the fundraising. And being in Las Vegas really wasn't a factor in being there because we were just playing basketball games. We were there for 5 days, played 4 games. So I couldn't tell you, anything about being in Las Vegas other than that's where the games were played. The kids stayed at the university, and it was the first time we'd ever traveled, representing the high school, and it was a really good experience. And those kids have all done very well. I think the whole group of kids have all, we see most of them. The only one we don't see so much is Felix Rivera. He lives down in Puerto Rico now. He's working with the amateur basketball in Puerto Rico, but they've all done very well, and they were really good group of kids.
now Jared, we still see Jared, right? Jared
Jared
still comes
comes
to the
regularly.
games.
Yeah, he lives out in Fairlawn, and he and Ben Gamble. Ben was the 6th man on that team. Ben's my assistant coach, and Ben and Jared are still very friendly. Mandy works right here in the city. Phil Robinson's sons come to the gym to work out, so we've kept in close contact. And Joe Miekowitz we see occasionally.
But Mandy Johnson was definitely, I guess, I always consider him to be a real blue collar, one of the toughest kids that ever came to be.
Yeah, he was such an from the time we elevated to varsity. He played JV when he was a freshman, and the first game we were trying to figure out whether we should bring him up to the varsity because bringing a freshman up to the varsity, sometimes the kids are physically ready, but they're not necessarily emotionally ready for the day-to-day pressure.
Right.
Hanging around with the older kids. You got to be real careful about that, and you got to really know who your older kids are. Will the older kids be able to nurture that younger kid when you bring them up? So we had an alumni game, and we had some pretty good players coming back from the alumni game. So we took Mandy and we brought him up from the JV to the varsity, and he scored 33 points against the alumni. So we kind of figured at that point, we'll monitor it closely, but he was ready.
But he was way ahead of his time, even athletically.
Yeah.
I remember the story when I was driving down to the game in Willingboro, where I was with my friends in the car, and we were in a car accident at the intersection going into the high school, going into the game.
Yes, state championship.
We left the car, filled the police report out, let the car sit there, and we ran into the game, which I know you remember that. And I just want to know if you remember what Mandy Johnson did when he pinned the ball on the backboard. I mean, he was tell us about that. He was way ahead of his time.
He was such a good athlete, and he grew up playing in the public housing courts at the Marion Gardens. So from the time he was 11 or 12 years old, he was getting choosed into the game when the men were playing. So when he got to high school, he wasn't necessarily a polished basketball player, had not necessarily been coached a lot, but he had played around. He already had his PhD in assessing situations on the court and figuring out, what to do.
I mean, he was the first player that I've ever seen on the high school level pin the ball on the backboard.
Yeah, and he was a 6-foot guard, and he was such a good defensive player that I took him up to the 5-star camp, which is run up in the Poconos. Howard Garfinkel ran, best camp in the country, and in the games during the week that he played, he was such a terrorist on defense that all of the games during the week, the other guy would handle the ball, and they would send Mandy's man down the other end of the court so he didn't have to bring it up against him. When you're talking about playing against elite kids, that's a real tribute to how good a player he was.
And then, following that era, I think it was just after that. I remember with my best friend Alan Liss when we first started out at the Boys and Girls